Thank you so much for introducing me. I will talk about diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease by imaging of amyloid and tau positron emission tomography (PET). This is my conflict of interest. In Alzheimer's disease, signal plaques composed of amyloid beta protein accumulating outside of neurons and neurofibrillary tangles composed of phosphorylated tau protein accumulating inside neurons are observed. These two pathological changes combine to cause neuronal loss, resulting in gradual brain atrophy. Early diagnosis is important in Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is said to have a long course of more than 10 years. Symptoms that appear early in the course of the disease include memory impairment, disorientation, executive dysfunction, decreased or poor judgment, withdrawal from work or social activities, and so on. Memory impairment is particularly prominent among these symptoms. How is Alzheimer's disease diagnosed in daily clinical practice? First, the patient and family are interviewed. Cognitive function is also examined by neuropsychological tests. Laboratory testing is also performed. Imaging studies such as CT, MRI, FDG PET, and brain pathology spectrum are used to look for findings that are characteristic of Alzheimer's disease. However, early diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease is not always easy. A negative amyloid PET scan is considered to rule out Alzheimer's disease. We would like to present our multi-center studies on how difficult it is to diagnose Alzheimer's disease in early stages without amyloid PET. Amyloid PET was performed in 93 patients with impaired cognitive function and suspected Alzheimer's disease, with an average MMA score of 21.2. In patients with very high likelihood of Alzheimer's disease, the positive rate of amyloid PET was only 79%. And in those with high likelihood of Alzheimer's disease, the rate dropped to 60%. Another multi-center study examined the positivity rate of amyloid PET in patients with milder cognitive impairment and suspected Alzheimer's disease, with an average MMA score above 23. Diagnostic confidence of Alzheimer's disease was assessed from 15% to 85% probability. The positive amyloid PET rate was 52% in 54 patients with diagnostic confidence of Alzheimer's disease above 50%, and 44% in 45 patients with diagnostic confidence of Alzheimer's disease below 50%, with no significant difference in the positive rates between these two groups. Early diagnosis is difficult because Alzheimer's disease and non-Alzheimer's disease sometimes have similar clinical symptoms, similar clinical course, and similar imaging findings. Especially in the elderly, Alzheimer's disease and non-Alzheimer's disease often coexist, making the diagnosis more difficult. To make this diagnosis more reliable, a diagnostic method based on biomarkers that reflect pathological changes in Alzheimer's disease has been proposed. This new diagnostic method is made possible by advances in biochemical testing of cerebrospinal fluid and positron emission tomography. Under this diagnostic method, a positive test for both amyloid and tau is sufficient to diagnose Alzheimer's disease, regardless of the presence or absence of neurodegeneration. This has reduced the diagnostic weight of neurodegeneration biomarkers. Neuroimaging is performed using amyloid PET for amyloid beta protein accumulation, tau PET for tau protein accumulation, and MRI or glucose metabolism PET for neurodegeneration. Compared to cerebrospinal fluid testing, imaging has the advantage of showing the location of protein accumulation and neurodegeneration. Combining the respective positive and negative results yields 8 different profiles. Profiles that are negative for amyloid rule out Alzheimer's disease. Profiles that are amyloid positive are referred to as the Alzheimer's continuum. A profile that is amyloid positive and tau positive is Alzheimer's disease. If the profile is amyloid positive and tau negative, there is comorbidity of Alzheimer's disease and non-Alzheimer's disease pathology, and it cannot be said that the patient has Alzheimer's disease. Now we'd like to move to visual interpretation and quantification method of amyloid PET. First of all, to clarify the significance of amyloid PET, I will explain amyloid cascade hypothesis of Alzheimer's disease. In familial Alzheimer's disease, missense mutations in the amyloid precursor protein or presenilin 1 or 2 genes induce increased relative amyloid beta 42 production throughout life. On the other hand, in sporadic Alzheimer's disease, failure of amyloid beta clearance mechanisms induce gradually rising amyloid beta 42 levels in the brain. These increases of amyloid beta levels cause amyloid accumulation and oligomerization in limbic and association cortices of the brain. Amyloid beta oligomers exert subtle effects on synapses. Then amyloid beta oligomers gradually deposits as diffuse plaques. Microglial and astrocytic activation and attendant inflammatory response occur, followed by altered neuronal ionic homeostasis and oxidative injury. These changes cause neuronal dysfunction with transmitter deficits, while altered kinase and phosphatase activity induces deposition of neurofibrillary tangles. Thus, increased amyloid beta level eventually leads to the onset of dementia. Amyloid deposition observed in amyloid PET is a prerequisite for Alzheimer's disease diagnosis and leads to early diagnosis. Recently, we investigated the association between amyloid accumulation and diffusion coefficients associated with glyphatic systems in sporadic Alzheimer's disease using diffusion tensor imaging of MRI. We found that the lower the diffusion coefficient, the more amyloid accumulates in the temporal parietal cortex and posterior cingulate gyrus and precorneus. 5 PET tracers, carbon-11 PIB, fluorine-18 fluorobetapill, fluorine-18 flutemetamol, fluorine-18 fluorobetaben, and fluorine-18 NVIDIA 4694 are currently available. Dose, waiting time, and imaging time are recommended for each tracer. Waiting and imaging times vary from tracer to tracer, ranging from 30 to 120 minutes and 10 to 30 minutes, respectively. Amyloid PET interpretation is based on visual reading of positive or negative findings. Non-specific white matter accumulation is regarded as a negative finding. Gray matter accumulation in mainly 5 regions of interest, posterior gyrus and pregnance, frontal cortex, temporal cortex, the parietal cortex, and striatum is regarded as a positive finding. You can see amyloid negative and positive findings in carbon-11 PIB PET at the cerebellar level. Cerebellar medulla shows high accumulation in both negative and positive cases. On the other hand, cerebral cortex shows very low accumulation in both negative and positive cases. At the pons level, pons shows high accumulation due to the high white matter content in both negative and positive cases. Diffuse accumulation in cerebral white matter is observed without any accumulation in cerebral cortex in a negative case. Temporal cortex shows high accumulation in a positive case. High accumulation is observed in ethmoid sinus, sagittal sinus, and cavernous sinus in a negative case. Midbrain level, frontal and temporal cortices show high accumulation in a positive case. On the other hand, hippocampus shows low accumulation in a positive case. Basal ganglia level, in a negative case, internal capsule and corpus callosum show high accumulation. On the other hand, striatum shows low accumulation. Globus pallidus shows higher accumulation than striatum because of higher white matter content. In a positive case, high accumulation is observed in frontal and temporal cortices and striatum. Occipital cortex shows relatively low accumulation. Lateral ventricular body level. Posterior single gyrus shows high accumulation in a positive case. Centrum semioval level. Precuneus and parietal cortex shows high accumulation in a positive case. Pericentral sulcus area shows relatively low accumulation. Mid-sagittal section. In a positive case, high accumulation is observed in medial prefrontal cortex and posterior single gyrus and precuneus. Parasagittal section. Anteroventral striatum shows high accumulation in a positive case. Coronal section. Hippocampus shows low accumulation in a positive case. To summarize positive findings of amyloid PET, high accumulation is observed in posterior single gyrus and precuneus, frontal cortex, temporoparietal cortex and striatum. Striatal accumulation is more pronounced in familial Alzheimer's disease. Low accumulation in pericentral sulcus area, occipital lobe, and hippocampus. Cerebral cortex shows lowest accumulation. In visual reading of amyloid PET, lower concordance among readers in fluorine 18 labeled PET tracers than that in carbon 11 PIB. In an amyloid positive case, gray matter over white matter accumulation ratio is lower in fluorine 18 labeled tracers than that in carbon 11 PIB. This low contrast makes assessment of mild gray matter accumulation difficult in fluorine 18 labeled tracers. To help visual reading of amyloid PET, quantification of amyloid PET is proposed. Standardized uptake value ratio, SUVR, which is the ratio of specific accumulation over non-specific accumulation, has been conventionally used. On the other hand, central scale is newer, indicating stage of amyloid accumulation, calculated on the basis of carbon 11 PIB PET from 0 obtained from negative cases in young control subjects to 100 obtained from positive cases in elderly Alzheimer's disease patients. Central scale simplifies and expedites direct comparison of amyloid PET results across sites and studies, outlines the earliest thresholds for amyloid positivity, and defines the range of positivity in Alzheimer's disease. It robustly quantifies longitudinal changes and facilitates inter-tracer comparisons. You can see the difference between central scale 0 and 100 amyloid PET images. In a central scale 0 image, you cannot see any accumulation in gray matter. Unlike the SCVR, the central scale is a universal 100 level quantitative value that is independent of choice of reference area, whole cerebellum, cerebellar gray matter, pons, or whole cerebellum plus brainstem. Unlike the SCVR, the central scale is a universal 100 level quantitative value that is independent of used PET tracers. Fluorobetaben, flutemetamol, fluorobetapil, NVIDIA 4694, the PIB PET shows almost equal central scale value of 60. However, the SCVR varies from tracer to tracer. Case groups with negative and positive carbon 11 PIB PET by visual interpretation are shown with central scale. In sporadic Alzheimer's disease, amyloid accumulation begins in the posterosing gyrus and precuneus and frontal lobes, spreads to the temporal and parietal cortex, and finally to the striatum. Cases in the upper 10s to 20s on the central scale are not shown, but many cases in this range are experienced with confusing positive and negative visual interpretation. What is the optimal cutoff value for determining whether a patient is amyloid positive or negative on the central scale? A number of studies have been conducted in this regard. Studies comparing antemotor amyloid PET with postmotor neuropathology findings suggest that a central scale of 10 or less does not show senile plaque, thus ruling out Alzheimer's disease. A central scale between 12 and 20 shows moderate to frequent senile plaques in the CERAD classification, while a central scale of 24 or higher shows intermediate to high level of Alzheimer's disease pathology. A score of 26 or higher is in good agreement with visual assessment, and a score of 50 or higher correlates most strongly with the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. The gray zone for visual assessment is between 12 and 30 on the central scale, the range in which amyloid beta can be detected at the earliest stage. It is believed that a skilled reader can determine a positive result even at 16 to 17 by visual interpretation. In terms of disease progression, 19 is reported to be the cutoff for a reliable worsening of the rate of change on the central scale, and 26 is the optimal predictor of progression to dementia after 6 years of amyloid PET. To calculate the central scale of amyloid PET, one has to run statistical parametric mapping on MATLAB software and perform a lot of processing. Several software packages have been published to perform this series of processes accurately and effortlessly. Here we present the AmiCont software we developed. This software is compatible with the 5 currently used amyloid PET tracers. It automatically calculates the central scale and performs atomic standardization of PET for central scale calculation using MRI or CT of PET-CT. It also displays a D-score map compared to a database consisting of amyloid-negative young healthy subjects. Here are the output results of AmiCont software. SAVR and central scale are calculated. Colored Z-score maps compared to a database consisting of amyloid-negative young healthy subjects are shown in brain surface and tomographic standard brain MRI. I will show a flutemetamol PET of an equivocal case by visual interpretation. No focally increased accumulation is present in gray matter. However, somewhat diffuse increase of cortical accumulation is present. This is the AmiCont results of this case. The central scale is 23. Posterior single gyrus and precuneus and medial prefrontal cortex shows significantly increased accumulation in a G-score map. This case may be diagnosed as amyloid positive. I show another equivocal case by visual interpretation of fluorobeta PET. A somewhat increase of accumulation in posterior single gyrus and precuneus, but not obvious. This is the AmiCont results of this case. The central scale is 32. Posterior single gyrus and precuneus and medial prefrontal cortex shows significantly increased accumulation in a G-score map. This case may be also diagnosed as amyloid positive. To become proficient in the evaluation of amyloid PET, combined use of visual read and quantitative assessments using a central scale and G-score mapping is useful. Then we move to visual interpretation and quantification method of tau PET. Although several tau PET tracers have been developed, let us summarize the requirements for Alzheimer's disease diagnosis. First, they must not bind to amyloid beta protein, TDP43 protein, and other proteins, such as alpha-synuclein at all. Second, tau proteins are broadly classified into two groups: 3-lipid tau, which has a microtubule binding region with 3 lipids, and 4-lipid tau, which has 4 lipids. In Alzheimer's disease, both 3-lipid and 4-lipid tau are present, and PET tracers that bind only to combinations of both 3 and 4-lipid tau proteins, and not to 3-lipid tau alone or 4-lipid tau alone are required. Diseases in which both tau proteins are present include Alzheimer's disease, senile dementia of the neurofibrillary tangle type, and chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Diseases in which only 3-lipid tau is present include peak disease, and diseases in which only 4-lipid tau is present include progressive splenomegaly palsy, corticobasal degeneration, and argyrophilic brain disease. Third, there must be less accumulation of non-tau materials, so-called off-target accumulation. Some of the tau PET agents developed to date are prone to binding to monoamine oxidase or to the choroid plexus. Since the choroid plexus is also present in the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle, binding to the choroid plexus makes it difficult to detect early accumulation of tau protein in medial temporal areas. The pathologist black stage classification is often used to describe the development of neurofibrillary changes during the progression of Alzheimer's disease. In stage 1 and 2, tau protein accumulation is confined to the medial temporal lobe, including the transcendental and internal cortices. In stage 3, accumulation spreads to the limbic system, including the fusiform gyrus and the posterocingulate gyrus. And in stage 4, it extends to the lateral neocortex of the lower temporal lobe. In stage 5 to 6, tau accumulation spreads over a wide area of the neocortex. Thus, from stage 4 onward, tau accumulation spreads throughout the neocortex. In Alzheimer's disease, it has been reported that there is a correlation between the location and spread of tau protein accumulation and cognitive function. Tau PET allows pathological staging of this drug in the living brain. We are now investigating the utility of ATN classification in patients with impaired cognition and suspected Alzheimer's disease using amyloid and tau PET. In this investigation, we are using highly specific amyloid and tau PET tracers. For amyloid PET, fluorine 18, NVIDIA 4694, which is the most superior fluorine 18 labeled amyloid PET tracer. It has a very large dynamic range and it's easy to detect very mild amyloid accumulation. For tau PET, fluorine 18 MKS 6240, which is a second-generation tau PET tracer, most widely used in the world, with low off-target accumulation. It binds only to 3-repeat and 4-repeat tau, thus ideal for Alzheimer's disease. The first case shows normal Alzheimer's disease biomarker A-T-N-. N is evaluated by voxel-based morphometry of 3D T1 weighted imaging. Amyloid central scale is minus 0.6. No significant tau accumulation in the brain. There is a slight accumulation in melanin-containing substantia nigra. MKS 60 to 40 accumulates in melanin and melanocytes, including the retina. The second case shows A plus T plus N minus, a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. Amyloid central scale is 56.1. Tau accumulation is present in medial temporal areas, right temporal parietal cortex, and posterior sigmoid gyrus. Bragg stage of tau accumulation is 5. No significant atrophy is present. The third case shows A plus T plus N plus, diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. Amyloid central scale is 70.7. Tau accumulation is observed in medial temporal areas and right lateral temporal cortex. Bragg stage of tau accumulation is 4. Significant atrophy is present in bilateral medial temporal areas and right lower lateral temporal cortex. Tau accumulation pattern in medial temporal area is hook-like. In sagittal section, tau accumulation is high in amygdala, lynx, and entorhinal to parahippocampal gyrus, and low in hippocampus. The fourth case shows A plus T minus N plus, Alzheimer's and concomitant suspected non-Alzheimer's pathologic change. Amyloid central scale is 37. No significant tau accumulation is present in the brain. Medial temporal lobe atrophy is present. Amyloid positivity alone should not be enough to diagnose Alzheimer's disease. The fifth case shows A minus T minus N plus, non-Alzheimer's disease pathologic change. Amyloid central scale is minus 3.4. No significant tau accumulation is present in the brain. Medial temporal lobe atrophy is present. The sixth case shows A minus T plus N plus, diagnosed as senile dementia of the neurofibrillary tangles type. Amyloid central scale is 0. Tau accumulates in bilateral medial temporal areas with hippocampal atrophy. Senile dementia of the neurofibrillary tangles type is 3-repeat 4-repeat tauopathy, and a slowly progressive dementia with abundant neurofibrillary tangle in the hippocampal areas. It's more common in the late-stage elderly. Onset with memory impairment, and absence or scarcity of senile plaques throughout the brain. It is referred to as primary age-related tauopathy (PART), and the main background of suspected non-Alzheimer's disease pathophysiology (SNP). So far, we have investigated 23 patients with average MME scores of 25. Out of 23 patients, 12 cases are diagnosed as Alzheimer's disease using these two PET tracers, A plus, T plus. All of 8 ATN profiles are observed. This ATN classification provides us correct diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. Tau PET quantification has been reported to measure SUVR in the volume of interest based on Bragg stage, using the cerebral cortex as a reference area. 3 volume of interest are proposed: medial temporal area, temporal parietal cortical area, and the rest of the neocortex. Many studies have applied volumes of interest derived from the free surface analysis of 3D T1-weighted imaging co-registered to PET. A standardized central scale has also been proposed for some second-generation tau PET probes. Free surface voids are displayed by color in mediotemporal and temporal parietal and the rest of the neocortex and the cerebral cortex as a reference area. These voids are overlaid on tau PET to measure SUV. We investigate relationship between MMSE score and amount of amyloid or tau accumulation. No significant relationship is observed between MMSE score and amount of amyloid accumulation, while overall amount of tau accumulation well correlates to MMSE score. Moreover, neocortical tau accumulation amount correlates to MMSE better than medial temporal tau accumulation amount. Take-home messages. The outcome of amyloid PET significantly leads to a change in the clinical diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. To become proficient in the evaluation of amyloid PET, combined use of visual reading and quantitative assessment is useful. Second-generation tau PET provides accurate ATN profiles in Alzheimer's disease. Tau accumulation in the neocortex correlates with cognitive function better than amyloid accumulation. Some of today's talk is available on YouTube. Please search Hiroshi Matsuda. Thank you for your attention.